Hello, Andrew. Welcome back.
Thank you, Keith. And you welcome back from another near-death COVID experience. You feeling back to normal now?
I'm almost back to normal. I had my second vaccine, and just like the first one, I had a 24-hour strong reaction to it, which is all expected, and now all good.
Well, April the 2nd, we are well into spring, but it's not spring everywhere in Silicon Valley, especially in terms of Clubhouse. The newsletter this week, Keith, suggests that Clubhouse may be collapsing both literally and figuratively. Your image of the week is of a Clubhouse collapsing. So what's happening with Clubhouse this week?
I think the true answer is not much is happening with Clubhouse, but there's a lot happening with Clubhouse followers. Those who, here's a tweet from TechCrunch just now. Clubhouse will create billions in value and capture none of it, is their claim. And this tweet from that Casey Newton pointed out, I don't know if that's too small for people to read, but it makes the point that in February and March, the number of downloads of the Clubhouse app declined by 73%. And that fact and the announcement by LinkedIn and several others that they are going to build competitive products to Clubhouse, including Spotify, which has to be a threat, is leading everyone to now say, has Clubhouse peaked? And is it now heading downwards? I think the answer is no, it hasn't, and no, it isn't. But there's lots of evidence to the contrary, so I may be out on a limb here.
I still am not in any way convinced by Clubhouse. I think it's not surprising in any way. When Twitter first came along, I remember the first time I used it, and I was amazed. It was so different from anything else I'd ever experienced online. And Clubhouse is just basically live, real-time audio. It's like radio with an audience. It's like, as I said to you before, it's like going to South by Southwest online, full of boring panel conversations about people droning on and on about stuff that nobody really cares about. So what's the radical element of Clubhouse? Why is it changing media?
So let's talk about this idea that it's radio with an audience. I think the essence of that is true. But in this case, the radio, the speakers, if you like, the presenters can come from anywhere in the world immediately. So in terms of talent acquisition, you're entirely unconstrained. So you don't need a whole department booking people. It's right there. And secondly, the audience can come from anywhere and is unlimited, relatively unlimited in size, up to several thousand. And the audience can interact with the speakers but through gestures like raising their hand and by being given the microphone. So it's a new experience from the point of view of what we humans spend our time doing. Like, we might be podcast subscribers and we spend a lot of time looking for podcasts to subscribe to, put them on our devices and listen to them when we go for a walk. That's a behavior. We might hang out on YouTube watching videos of things that we're fascinated by. That's a behavior. We might watch live streams like this, but not be able to participate beyond texting. That's a behavior. The Clubhouse behavior goes beyond all of those because firstly, it's real time, which could be considered a limit. But the fact that it's real time means be there or be square. And so it compels attendance for anything you're interested in. And that seems to
it means be there and be square. I mean, there's something.
Well, that's true. There's
conformist about this. It's the sort of ultimate expression of echo chamber culture. I just see it
before we get into echo chamber culture, let's just agree with what you said. Which this is Teare Eyal, who is the author of a very famous book called Hooked. He's talking about whether Clubhouse will be a habit or a has-been. And he talks about the challenge for Clubhouse. He says lots of good things that make it distinct, but he says the challenge is if you're going to be live and real time, and that's your differentiator, it's really, really important that you have high quality content 24/7. Because if you don't, when people show up and they're bored, they won't come back easily. He gives them tick boxes in every other box in terms of the triggers to get you in.
Yeah, I mean, surprise, surprise. You don't have to be a genius to realize that people aren't going to listen to shit. I mean,
right.
Again, it's the same old thing. And that's why one of your other headlines this week is intriguing, particularly because Andreessen Horowitz are involved in Substack and the Andreessen Horowitz investment. Andreessen are recognizing that, and that, as you say, they're putting more and more money into new media startups, but they're recognizing that quality content is critical. And that's what Substack is doing so well.
Well, Substack is like Clubhouse in the sense that it is both quality and lack of quality. There are hundreds of thousands of newsletters, most of which don't have many readers or attract much attention.
But the difference between Substack and Clubhouse is that I know who I'm going to follow on Substack. When I go to Clubhouse, it gives me a headache. I have no idea where I am. And I have no idea on the kind of quality. So I'm happy to subscribe to Substack writers I like who provide me views or content that I wouldn't otherwise have. I don't see that on Substack, on Clubhouse. Clubhouse is sort of, I don't know what you would call it. There's a word, I guess it's their interface, their editorial interface doesn't really exist.
Well, you have to work at it. So, for example,
but nobody wants to work at it. That's the whole point.
Well, all you have to do is what you do on Substack, which is follow people. If you choose the people to, so if you choose the people to follow, like I follow Josh Constine because I consider that Josh is producing very high quality.
Isn't he somehow involved with it? Isn't he one of the partners?
No, he's a venture firm called Signal Fire. But he does a weekly show which is all about media transformation, and it's really good. So I follow that. I follow Andreessen because he does this big ideas or deep thoughts. I forget what it's called. I follow Mark Butcher from the UK TechCrunch.
Mike Butcher, but again, what I don't get with Clubhouse is that we always have this conversation. Everyone seems obsessed with Clubhouse, and everyone knows it's not very good. So what's the obsession? Are we just bored? We're looking for new content plays, and there aren't any.
Well, I have two prisms on it. I think there's a lot on it that isn't very good, but I think that's true of any mass media. I think it's all about finding what is good, which.
But it's not essential. It's not new, is it?
No, well, it kind of is in the same way. This will sound weird to you, but I would compare it to the early internet news groups, where you subscribe to alt.compuserve.graphics.video cards, and you would go into this video card news group, and the guys who made video cards were there. They were experts. And if they could answer your questions, and they would put files up that could make your computer better. So it's almost like the audio version of bringing talent. To your point about the cult of the amateur, Clubhouse actually gives it the opposite. It's the cult of the expert. You can actually find the expert and listen to them and interact with them.
Yeah, but you can. I'm still not convinced. You can do that anyway. You can follow them on Twitter. You can follow them on Facebook.
Yeah, but you can't have an hour.
You can follow their YouTube channel. It's not as if they're doing.
No, but there's a difference between that and an hour-long spoken interaction where you.
But I also think that requires so much investment of time. I just don't think most people have that. Maybe I'm wrong.
That, I think that's always true. Like, I don't listen to podcasts in general for that reason. I don't watch many video blogs for that reason. This live streaming we do on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube attracts more viewers than the after on demand for the recorded one.
So let's get your take then on these other companies and platforms piling into this space. What do you see the outcome of this, say, in a year? Is Clubhouse going to be dominating the space, or will Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn, will they have essentially colonized it?
I think Clubhouse ends up winning because of the mass of experts it's already recruited. So everybody else can copy the features, but they can't get the people.
And you also, your newsletter this week is really focusing on creativity. You and I have sparred before on the ability to monetize automated creative content. The AI platform, Sam Altman's AI platform, seems to be generating a lot of AI content. Is anyone actually making money out of this, Keith? OpenAI.
What they're actually doing is saving money. So this article, which is from The Verge, points out that OpenAI is now producing 4.5 billion words a day that are being used in production in some way.
Creative. And what is it? Sort of for manuals?
No, you send it learning material, and it then you point it at sources, and it can write stories based on its prior knowledge and its current inputs, a bit like a journalist that is mainly a reporter would do. And so I think what it's doing, basically automated reporting. That's one feature. It's also doing automated creative. There's an API, and the app developer, and there's now 300 different apps using it. The app developer kind of tells it what it wants through the API, creative storytelling, fiction.
This is going to terrify a lot of people about the algorithm, Keith. And yet Nick Clegg this week, the head of PR or comms at Facebook, the former British head of the British Liberal Party, he himself is suggesting that we shouldn't be as fearful of the algorithm as many people are becoming.
Yeah, Nick Clegg is familiar to you and me, Andrew, because he's a former British politician from the Liberal Party, which is kind of a very tiny middle party that had power for some time through an alliance with David Cameron's Conservative Party. He left politics and became head of, I don't know what you would call it, communications and PR at Facebook. And after a long delay where he's been silent, years actually, he's written a substantive piece this week on why humans and the algorithm belong together, as opposed to the idea that the algorithm is in control. He's making the point that the algorithm is reinforcing your ability to be you. And so it starts with the independence of the individual as a unique human being, tries to discover what the attributes of that unique human being are, and then tries to help that human being see interesting things that are likely to be of appeal to them. The title is "It Takes Two to Tango," which is the core of his point. And he makes the point that the algorithm is actually benign. It's just humans.
I wonder if just as Jeff Bezos was putting a lot of pressure on his pushback against Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, I wonder if Nick Clegg is getting some heat from Zuckerberg to actually earn his money. As you say, we haven't heard anything. God knows what he does all day. And Facebook gets a worse and worse reputation. He's clearly doing a terrible job. He did a terrible job in England too, as the head of the Liberal Party. So it's not exactly surprising.
Well, until his recent...
apart from that, of course, we love him. Hi, Nick, if you're watching.
Until Zuckerberg's recent transformation into a pro-government regulation advocate, I always thought he should have hired me to do this job because I was pretty good.
You are a self-described, Keith, nice guy. I'm not sure if that's a job that is suited for nice guys. So let's just briefly talk about Substack as well. I maybe it's because I am on Substack and I'm not on Clubhouse, but I think Substack is a good product and I think it has a lot of potential. And Andrews are investing in it, so that suggests something because they're usually pretty smart.
I'm really pleased for Substack, and I agree with you. Hamish McKenzie, who's one of the founders, was an old a journalist that was at TechCrunch briefly, and then went to Sarah Lace's publication, whose name is currently escaping me.
Pando
Daily, and he came to me for advice quite a bit. So I built up a bit of a relationship with him. He's a very smart, thoughtful, driven person. And so I'm very, very pleased for them. That said,
he went from Pando to founding Substack.
There you go. He was a young guy.
Sarah's thrilled about that.
He was young at Pando, and now he's probably worth hundreds of millions after this deal.
Well, but it comes back again, and this is what's also missing about Clubhouse. I might make an effort on Clubhouse if there was some roadmap for me actually making money. But Substack is focused on enabling the creative to make money. There's Glenn Greenwald now, who's rumored now to be earning up to $1 million a year from being obnoxious online, and he's very talented at that.
Latest numbers are 160K a month.
Yeah, well, he deserves it. He's a good writer. I mean, he kind of is the political version, I think, of Mike Arrington, obnoxious and smart and dislikable, but essential reading. So, but at least it's clear why people would want to use it. Why would a radio personality, someone with a nice voice who needs to pay their mortgage and buy their food, why would they go on Clubhouse when there's no financial model, where there's no business model?
I think Clubhouse is going to have a compelling business model based on...
Well, they better have one. I mean, otherwise, what's the point of it?
Do you want to hear what it is?
Yeah, go on.
It's going to be entry price. It's like a subscription to either one or a series of...
Brilliant, like going back to clubs. So after all this internet madness of the last 30 years, we're going to have to pay to enter a room.
Well, not all rooms. Some rooms will be worth more than others, but there'll be an Eventbrite style thing going on there for sure.
As I've always said, there's only two business models. Wherever you listen to on the internet, when people talk about new business models, either for content, either you sell advertising around it or you pay for it. There's nothing else, right?
I think that's probably true. I think NFTs are a third one, which is
another form of snake oil, and a third form, maybe it's not snake oil, but another area that's misunderstood are SPACs, and they're under pressure this week. Finally, the reality of SPACs are being exposed, Keith. Is that market collapsing too, like Clubhouse?
SPACs are certainly under pressure. Maybe
Is that your nice way of saying they're fucked?
No, I don't think they are at all. I think the market in general, you have to put it in context, actually. The market in general, let me just show this because I follow SPACs on Google Finance. And
by the way, I'm paid on this show by Diet Coke. That's how I generate. That's how I'm creating revenue. That's how I'm monetizing this.
So you must be a Democrat if you're still drinking Coke.
Why? What's it?
Oh, you don't know the big controversy this week about Coke supporting Biden and therefore the Republicans denouncing it. So this is a SPAC kind of leaderboard, and a SPAC starts at $10 a share. So if you look at Chamath Palihapitiya's SPACs, 1065, 1117, one of them is at 1727. So the story this week was driven by Chamath himself doing a podcast called All In, which Jason Calacanis hosts with David Sachs and David Freiberg. And Chamath spoke at length about how much money he's lost compared to how much he's made as SPACs have declined. And so and apparently there were 50 SPACs doing what are known as pipes. A pipe is a private investment in a public vehicle. There were 50 last week trying to raise very large sums of money simultaneously. So the challenge for SPACs is that there's a lot of them all trying to get money all at the same time. And so there's going to be a bifurcation between quality companies. See, because the key for a SPAC is who is the team doing the SPAC and how good a company do they merge with.
It's like it's content. You know, just because you've got an interesting vehicle doesn't make it a sure winner. And just as you can go on Clubhouse and create a show doesn't make it any good, just as you do a SPAC doesn't make the company any good, right?
Yeah, it's still the key innovation here is that it's a fantastic innovation for later stage companies that are not ready to IPO, but need a decent amount of capital to achieve their end goals. The market is prepared to fund, forward plans that they believe in. And a SPAC is a new vehicle that makes that possible whilst giving liquidity and no risk, by the way, to the investors, because they can always take their money back right up until the point of the merger.
So is Chamath going to lose his fortune, or he looks quite happy in that photo you showed?
They had a fairly serious conversation about leverage, where, for example, he's investing close to $1 billion, I think, a bit more, and he's being offered loans to leverage 10x. And he made the point that if he took the loans, which is tempting, you would only have to go down by 10% to lose all your money. Whereas if you don't take loans, you'd have to go down by 100% to lose your money. And they were talking about the collapse of the hedge fund beginning with A that I can't pronounce last week, which exactly that happened to. And it tanked the stocks of Discovery and a bunch of other companies overnight by 50% in some cases, because the hedge fund had to liquidate because its loans got called. So the discussion about SPACs was tied up with some market analysis. It's actually a really good podcast, I've got to say. It's one of the better ones out there.
Speaking of pipes, Keith, your startup of the week is Pipe.
It is.
So you need to pipe up about Pipe. What are they?
Well, in the words of the famous painting, this is not a pipe.
Surrealist painting.
Exactly. So here is the startup of the week, Pipe. Pipe raised money at a $2 billion valuation just a few weeks after raising 50 million at a much lower valuation. And what Pipe does is it calls itself the NASDAQ for revenue, but it basically gives money to companies that have good revenue instead of buying their equity. And it converts that into a derivative based on the company, which it then securitizes and sells to third parties. So it's kind of a middleman in a marketplace between money and companies with revenue.
Good, or it's not a scam, Keith?
It's not a scam. It's a financial instrument that has some merit. It only goes wrong if they make bad choices about which companies to do it with.
Which, of course, they will.
They may.
That's the nature of human beings.
Yeah, but it's definitely something to watch. I've noticed over recent months that debt instead of equity is becoming quite a big thing in early stage.
I have to say, the more I do this show with you, the more I'm convinced that we are on the brink of a major financial meltdown. That all these instruments, all these experiments, they're all Enron-like in their dodginess in one way or the other. And there are so many Enron-like characters running around, like your friend Chamath. I'm telling you,
we should do. You know what we should?
We're gonna be talking about the complete collapse, one way or the other, of this entire economy. I'm convinced of it.
Well, we'll get to it in a minute, but that's what the tweet of the week suggests as well.
Okay, well, let's get to the tweet of the week, and it's not by you know who, Paul Graham.
No, it is not. It is by Dan Primack, who is an extremely experienced financial analyst and startup.
Yeah, I know him. He's good.
He's very, very good. His newsletter is fantastic.
Although he's not quite as good looking as that image, I think he's definitely.
Well, if we're going to use an avatar, why wouldn't we use a good looking one?
Yeah.
So he says,
although if he's using that for dating, it might not be. Dan, if you're watching, be honest about what you really look like.
Something might be happening. 2 IPOs just postponed. SPAC formation is slowing way down. And so he's kind of highlighting, he's smelling the coffee, let's say.
Well, he's smelling that there is no coffee.
But you and me,
only become obvious when they're obvious, and then after it all happens, everyone's going to say, "How did we believe in SPACs? How did we believe in pipes? How did we believe in all this stuff that we didn't really understand that made a few people incredibly wealthy?" It's exactly like Enron. It's exactly like the .com boom that everyone played along, and then when it collapses, everyone said, "Oh yeah, it was obviously fraudulent."
You know what you and me should do, Andrew? We should do one of those long bets where we both put $1,000 into a pot, and I'll invest mine in all these crazy ideas, and you do whatever you want to do, and
we'll spend it at the long bar when the economy opens again. We can go to that excellent bar, the the long bar and the time thing that in the Presidio, not in the Presidio, down in Cow Hollow.
I've never been to it, but I do know the long bar at the San Jose Earthquake Stadium that covers one end of the ground completely, which is a great bar.
Well, it imagines the long term. It's just next to Green's, the restaurant. It's really good. It's a great bar. Finally, Keith, you're doing a bit of a Steve Jobs this week. We have a last word. Beyond the tweet of the week, beyond the startup of the week. And what is your last word this week?
Well, hats off to Oren Hoffman, who forced me to do this because his posts were so good I couldn't resist finding how to use them. There's 3 graphics. I'll just do all 3 of them one after the other. Graphic 1, how long does it take to raise a massive amount of money? On the left, the time TechCrunch readers think it takes to raise funding. On the right, the time it actually takes to raise funding.
And that's if you actually raise it. I think it's it's so hard, even in the best economies, even if you're a darling of VCs, it's so hard to raise money, isn't it, Keith?
Very hard. I've been involved in raising more than almost $2 billion in my career. And it's no single one is easy. The second one is your fundraise to save some of the best VC firms for last. So this is counterintuitive. I advise this to a lot of my startups if they are on a learning curve. Sometimes I do the opposite. Sometimes I say to them, look, I think you can get the best people, and you don't even want to be pitching the worst people unless you have to. So start with the best. So I think it is specific to the company and the stage it's at and the quality of the story. But in general, he's right.
Well, also it assumes you know your best pitch. Most people don't. It's like if you're dating, you probably should save your best lines.
Yeah.
Or dates, not your first dates, because you need to get in the swing of things.
Not to push my own value, but this is what I do. This is what I get paid for doing. I work with companies, with the founders, teaching them how to pitch their story to the best advantage vis-a-vis investors, which is very different from their customer-facing story or their sales story. And
do most people know their best pitches, or does it take someone like yourself to explain it to them?
They mostly have no clue because they don't know what the customer's looking for. They sell an internal view of their company without paying attention to what the buyer is buying. And that means they don't actually tell the story for the buyer's business model. And the key is understanding that the buyer is mostly interested in the end game, in the case of investing. And
but it comes back down, Keith, to the theme of this week, of That Was the Week, is content. Because everything is about content, whether you're pitching VCs, whether you're putting a show on Clubhouse, whether you're putting a newsletter together on Substack. If you don't have good content, you have no value. Is that fair?
That's why I have you on this show, Andrew. I'd be lost.
Well, that was the week. Once Keith gets too nice to me, we have to end the show. April the 2nd. I hope you all have a good week. I've moved to San Francisco, to the top of one of the top hills here. So I'm excited to look out over all of you. Keith remains in Palo Alto. He's still alive, and I'm sure he will be alive next week on April 9th. So keep well, Keith. No more COVID crises, and we'll talk again next week.
Will do. Thank you. Bye, everyone.